I got like 5 or 6 bullet points for every single driver, and then you just see for Marino Sato, I just put no. Don't you dare put this in the preview.
Hello and welcome to the F1 Feeder Series podcast, your guide to keeping up to date on everything in the junior single-seater world. We've come to it, the episode everybody has been waiting for, the Formula 2 season review with a certain somebody called Josh Revell. We had him for the F2 preview, we've had him for the F3 season review, now we've got him for the F2 season review. Josh, how are you today? Looking forward to this one. I'm sure you're going to get your teeth stuck into a few drivers.
Yeah, will do. I'll have great fun talking about it, and not so much fun trying to understand what the hell my hair is doing.
Well, you're hidden slightly by a pop filter, which is working oh so well, now covering the middle of your face. So doing your best to make sure you look most presentable for the podcast. But if we're talking about professionalism,
peak professionalism at play here.
If you want peak professionalism, Josh, you're going to look down to Tyler Foster, who has been eating what he says is not a pot noodle, and it is in fact a...
It's called Indomie. It's like a Filipino thing.
An Indomie. So Indomie, if you want to sponsor the podcast, please get in touch. Tyler always shouts to me as well. He always says, Jim, why do you always bring up food? He's literally eating during the podcast. But I think that summarizes the season for F1 Feeder Series. But before we get into it, if you do enjoy the podcast, please like, comment, and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. We've done so well this year, so thank you everybody who has already subscribed to the channel. It really has helped us out. If you can leave a rating or review if you're listening to the audio-only version, that is also greatly appreciated. You can leave a rating on Spotify and review us on Apple Podcasts. You can also join our Discord server, where we now have over 200 real-life drivers from the Feeder Series world. I know Floris Visman, our Lord and Savior, has gone and DM'd pretty much every Feeder Series driver that exists and has done so well to get them to join, which just shows how well respected F1 Feeder Series is in the F1 Feeder Series world. So have a look on there if you do want to get involved. If you're watching, you'll notice this week I'm not in my hoodie, but you're about to see it over my shoulder because I'm in Vietnam, and Vietnam is very, very hot, and hoodies not so much a good idea, but you can get your own merchandise from the F1 Feeder Series Redbubble shop. And because of Black Friday, Cyber Monday, all that stuff, we actually have a 25% and above, I believe, sale on. So you can look good for Christmas. Get your stuff right now. And as I mentioned last week, we also started our second show on the YouTube channel to get you through the off season. It's called Transfer Weekly. It now has 2 episodes out to get you prepared for the 2023 season. Had such an amazing reaction so far. People really, really enjoying it. So that's really good to see. We're going to have that all through the off season, probably not over Christmas, but going to have a good few months of that. So please subscribe to the channel if you want to keep up to date on all the driver announcements in the coming weeks and months. It really does help us out. And if you are already subscribed, thank you so much. Okay, let's get into it then. Formula 2. It's been pretty good season, ended a little bit prematurely thanks to certain Felipe Drugovich, who we'll get into in a little bit, and how early he got into things. But on the whole, Josh, how much did you enjoy Formula 2 this year in comparison to other years?
Not gonna lie, it's actually underwhelming this year. No idea why. The racing wasn't quite as good, I felt, as it was in years gone by. In years gone by, Formula 2 is something that you absolutely look forward to, probably more so over Formula 1 in some ways, because the racing was always good, close between everyone. There were lots of prodigies coming in. This year, I don't know why, there was just not as much close racing as he was before. And whatever the reasons were, it was disappointing that there would be a lot of races where it would there'll be a lot of single file stuff going on. You'd have walkaway victories. It's just not what you would expect out of Formula 2 in a way. This isn't a criticism at Drugovich either. Just the sort of runaway title bout was not something that you would really want. You always want title bouts that go right down to the wire. we didn't have that this year for a variety of reasons. Take away how Drugovich drove. There were just, so many instances of Mechachrome being overly French that completely just destroys not just championship, but individual races as well. Where it's like, really, there were some drivers where it had how many engine failures this year. I remember Marino Sato talked about, what was it, like a 7th engine by Spielberg? And it's like, what? Like, come on. So it was disappointing. There were some good moments this year for sure, as F2 will always dig up something. Good racing. We had some blokes come through and absolutely show, what they were worth. But it just, I don't know. It was a net negative this year in terms of what I personally would have hoped and expected for Formula 2 and what we ended up getting.
I understand what you're saying. I think after what we've had the last few years, this probably didn't peak in the same way. It's almost actually copied over into Formula 1, didn't it? That this year was one of these ones. I don't know about you guys, but I was actually quite excited to get the season over and done with in Abu Dhabi because it seemed like it kind of dragged, especially from when Max took the title in Japan. Formula 3, on the other hand, was terrific, and that was the championship of 2022. But we've already covered Formula 3. Tyler, you have got right into Formula 2 all season. What did you think of this year on the whole?
I'm actually going to give a slightly positive outlook on it. Okay, I understand Josh's points about not having a title showdown and a lot of disappointment, but I think the thing to look out for after Piastri's, amazing year last year and some interesting battling between a number of more experienced drivers was that it was an odd one, but I think it actually did deliver. Some of the biggest drivers underperformed, and that left opportunities for new drivers to come through, drivers who, as we will talk about later on, kind of came out of nowhere in our eyes. Even the champion, as Josh mentioned, was sort of, nowhere near odds-on favourite. I thought at the beginning of the year that would be Daruvala, so I was well off. Congratulations to Drugovich, amazing season. And, for 2023, a number of new drivers are going to arrive straight out the gates after a great Formula 3 battle, and they'll come in straight away as title contenders because of a lot of guys are leaving and moving on. So, whether that's Vesti and Behrman at PREMA or, Hauger and Daruvala maybe moving to MP, it's going to be, hectic next year, that's for sure. So I actually think this year taking a little bit of a seat back was maybe what the series needed to go forward again.
I do fondly look back at the start of the season when we all thought Porsche was going to run away with the title. We were going to have Hauger and Daruvala with PREMA just doing their thing, PREMA being all dominant, and how naive we just were. And we have that sort of, we call in the UK like the Liverpool effect, and then Floris mentioned to me the Ferrari effect, that maybe next year is going to be our year. I feel we probably have the same now in Formula 2 when we look at the drivers making the step up. Like, next year is going to be the year, and then we find out we come to the end of it when Behrman's won the title by 500 points. So we're like, oh, it never actually happened as we expected. But that's why we like motorsport so much. I feel like it has been a good year, but probably not a 10 out of 10 season. So I completely understand where we're coming through. But what we're going to do, for anybody who hasn't watched any of the other videos that we've done, we're going to go through driver by driver. And there's a lot of drivers, especially in the teams that finished lower in the championship. We're going to go through driver by driver, team by team, in reverse order. So we're going to get to MP Motorsport at the end, and gives a bit of time for Tyler to continue munching on his super noodles. Campos, they finished P11 with 67 points, and we had 4 drivers. Ollie Caldwell then had himself a little ban where Larim Zendelli joined for round 11. And we also had Ralph Boschung, who himself had a break, but health in force with his awful health injury that he had this year. But it did lead to the unexpected return. Did anybody see this coming? Of Roberto Merri coming in for 3 rounds before Ralph's return with a podium at Spa. I feel this year, Campos weren't the worst team on the championship. And it's almost like the MP Motorsport that Ralph Boschung was the lead driver by quite a bit. If he was there the whole time with a driver of equal caliber, they'd be pretty much in the midfield. I'm obviously a massive Ralph Boschung fan, so don't trust the words I say. But I think for what Campos are, they had a pretty good year. They also had Ollie Caldwell. So, Josh, I'm getting the impression you'll have a few things to say about this. Tyler, please jump in. This is definitely more of a discussion than a Q&A sort of session. Josh, why don't you lead the way now with Campos Racing and the 4 drivers they had this year?
How do I make my opinions known without further blacklisting you guys? I guess I'll start off with Boschong, shall I? No, for the rounds he was in, aside from his break due to the illness, wasn't bad. Carried on from last year. We had some pretty good results. Solid results, a couple of podiums as well. Not as great as what last year was, I guess, but you can only expect so much out of Campos at the moment. So it was decent stuff all the same, but I gotta ask, because he's confirmed for next year as well.
Mm-hmm, he is.
What's the end game here? Like, is he planning to do a Markov and just sort of pitch up tent and be like, right, this is my home for the next 12 years? Or is he got bigger plans at play here? Because it's a lot of money for a Formula 2 season.
I was going to jump in because when he was on the podcast with us earlier in the year, he did say that he felt this was his first chance to have a full paid season that he knew in advance. So the way that he views it, and I understand a lot of the community doesn't view it necessarily the same, is that this was going to be his first proper full season where he knows he's going to complete the season, which is something that a very few drivers get to have, in particular Ralph's case.
This saw next season.
This season was meant to be, but then he obviously had the facet syndrome,
right,
which reduce that. So I think he's looking at this as, I've still not done a full season of Formula 2, which he hasn't, to be fair to the guy, but also I can understand the criticism that he's been around for a very long time, but that's his words, not mine.
Right, so the other drivers we had, Campos was Roberto Mary. Reliable enough, did some good results for when he was there. He did this before, didn't he? Where after his Formula 1 deal, he came back to Formula 2 before, and then he came back again. It's like, where did you come from? I didn't know you were still around. But it was solid enough, solid enough results for sure. Who was the other replacement driver this year? Was it Zandelli?
Zandelli had one round 11 it was.
It was kind of anonymous. I don't remember, if I'm honest, exactly how well he did.
Spa-Francorchamps finished P20 and P21, my Wikipedia tells me.
How the hell would I not know how he did there? I was at the track.
I think that says everything, to be honest, Josh.
Yeah, exactly. As for Ollie Caldwell, I can't really lie. He wasn't really that convincing, if I'm being totally honest. The race ban was pretty average. You could say, well, it's the first year, and you got to give him, that second year to prove his worth, even if he even is in discussions for another drive next year. But for whatever means he's in the Alpine Academy, you would expect someone who is aiming for Formula 1 to sort of cement themselves as a contender. And I understand that you're not in the top team, but there wasn't any suggestion watching the season that he was someone who sort of stood out from the rest, if I'm being totally freaking, kind to the guy. And I don't want to admonish and put down people, because I understand it's not nice, and it leaves you with one less driver to interview on this podcast, and leaves me with another person who's blocked me on Twitter. But, and the long and short of it is that when you compare these two drivers, Boschong and Caldwell, I don't think I'm going to be admonished if I say that the Swiss driver was the one who probably did perform better this year.
It wasn't a year to remember as his rookie season in F2. But Tyler, please talk us through what you thought of Campos this year.
Boschong, I think, was the surprise when he had his 2 podiums at the end of last year. I remember he was going to the end of the season, wasn't sure whether he was going to have another season, with that being this year, and then he never got a podium in his F2 career, and he got 2 in, sort of on the bounce, and that has seemingly set him off down the path a bit. It is a massive shame, because you never really know, even though he didn't miss 3/4 of the season, he still missed over half the season, or near half the season, I believe. So that course had an effect on them. I don't know whether Campos are becoming a team as a whole who are sort of on the back foot now. It seems like since they lost Jack Aitken, who was, I think, their last solid driver that fought towards the front, They haven't been able to fill it with anybody who's really brought anything in. Boschong is holding that team in very good stead, but for how long? That's the question. And what's the name of the syndrome, Jim? Do you remember?
Severe facet syndrome.
Facet syndrome, yeah. So that's the thing to keep in mind, is that this is not just like you sprained your ankle or something like that. This is something that could easily come back. And he has been greenlit by doctors for next year, otherwise he wouldn't be in the series. But the problem is with that sort of stuff, it comes back like that. So hopefully, just for the sake of him and Campos, he can get a full season in there, because a couple of podiums, and he got a podium as soon as he came back as well. He was out for 4 rounds, and he is 25, which actually might surprise people. I'd probably think people would give him an extra couple of years in terms of how old they might think he is. So he's not as old as you might think. Hopefully next year for him. Caldwell, all I'm going to say is, let's just hope that he's not going to turn into sort of Marino Sarto type driver, in the sense that this is it. Because when you're part of an Alpine program like that, you easily become detached. Someone like Roy Nassani comes to mind when you think of drivers who are part of academies who really are below other drivers in that academy. So I hope it doesn't get embarrassing, because I think he's had a tough year on him. And then Roberto Meri definitely deserves a shout out. He got the podium. I mean, it was a crazy race. His first race that Caldwell scored points in, so that shows you how crazy it was. But he stepped up, and regardless of how old you are, we saw Luca Giotto came into his home track at Monza, and he didn't, get in the points. So it's not like it's just because they're older, it's easier. It really is difficult. And he nearly did it again the week later. I think he span, or he was up in the points, and then he had an issue later on. But yeah, great to have someone come in like that and perform regardless of his age. But yeah, Campos for next year, it's going to be difficult for them. But
can I just say, Tyler, I expected Josh to come here and insult people, but instead we've had you, shouting how Ollie Caldwell is an equivalent of Marino Sarto, Roy Nassani, just going out there and saying these are awful drivers, pretty much. So
I'll give you the benefit of that. But in terms of rating, for me, I want to see what Josh has to say, because we're going to try and come to a compromise. But I'd say Boschong, I'd give sort of maybe a B, I think. Because
let's stick on the two drivers who are what we'd call the full-time drivers for the season. So that's Boschong and Ollie Caldwell. So you've got him for B for Boschong. Let's go from Caldwell on your side, Josh. Then we'll go back to Tyler. What would you go down on the Caldwell route?
C minus probably.
C minus.
Yeah. I won't go into the D's here, because I'll just give him the benefit of the first year stuff, even though I think he did a couple of rounds last year as well. Did he? Can someone fact check me on that? Did he? No, he did. I remember he did, because he crashed into Alessio De Later in the last round. Okay.
He did Jeddah and Yas Marina last year. You're quite right. So 6 races because of last year's format.
Yikes! That's when you've got an extra bit of help and it doesn't pay off, but it does look bad on you as well. Caldwell, I'd actually pretty much agree. I was actually thinking D plus, but C minus is pretty much next door. So yeah, it's on that category where it's it's been bad. It hasn't been complete garbage. It's not been one of the worst F2 seasons of all time. He's not a bad driver. It's not like he's that bit worse than them. He's just at the bottom of that list at the moment. He just needs to get himself up. I think he has definitely got tenths in him.
We've had bad experiences the last few years of some certain F2 drivers that have come in, and it's just get out. But Caldwell's not that. That's something we got to preface. Caldwell's not a bad driver. At least nowhere near as, nowhere near the level of certain drivers that have come through before. But the bar is very high here. You're talking if you go into F2, you're effectively saying Formula One is there, So if you go in there, you got to obviously have a degree of, I guess it's competency, a strong word to use in the scenario. But I mean, look, at the end of the day, when you've got others around you that appear to be doing a better job, I can't just sort of gloss over it and just pretend that you're doing a great job, because at the end of the day, when Boschong outscores him by 4 times the points by doing half the rounds, you got to ask questions.
Never thought of it. I've never thought of it like that. That's actually great.
But let's go on the scoring side for Boschong for you as well, then, Josh, just to get through Campos, because we've taken a long time on the first team. This could be a long ass podcast. But Boschong, you gave him a what, Tyler?
B, I'd say. So I'll give Coolway the C- that Josh had. I'm happy with that. But for Boschong, I go B.
I was about to say B or B minus, somewhere in that region. But I think, when you think about the team that he did it with, Campos is not an MP. They're not a PREMA. So, yeah, I'd give him a B in that regard because, and especially, did he get podiums on his return from his illness?
Very first race. It's a reverse grid sprint.
There you go. He gets his he gets what I call the Nicky Lauda tax. where you come back in a heroic return and you get a bloody good result. I guess I can call it that. Either that or about 40 people have shut down this podcast and blocked me.
Okay, then.
What we got next?
We've got next the new team, VAR, finished P10 in the standings, so they didn't finish bottom, with 73 points. And I have to say, after watching Formula 2 the last little while, this was actually a good thing to have come into the sport. We know VAR, obviously, Van Amersfoort have such a good pedigree in motorsport, but I feel like we had 11 teams in Formula 2 this year who were proper teams that should be there rather than a Williams-esque team right at the back. So the drivers, Amaury Cordial, Jake Hughes did rounds 1 to 8, and then David Beckman did rounds 7, and then 8 to 13. And then Juan Manuel Correa did round 14. So again, a big split. It's difficult to really say who the main drivers were. It's meant to be Amaury Cordial and Jake Hughes, I suppose. But Josh, in the preview for F2 this year, Amaury Cordial didn't get a stellar preview from you. Did he have a stellar year in your regards?
Funny you mentioned that. No. Do I have to talk about this guy? Like, I guess it's one of those scenarios where, like, I'm not here to talk about the person. I'm here to talk about the driver, Mm-hmm. It's a bit like with Nelson Piquet. Look, I have certainly got an opinion on this guy in real life, but it's not really what I'm meant to do here. I'm meant to talk about the driver, Nelson Piquet, the person, he's an interesting character, to put it extremely mildly. As a driver, one of the best of his era. Mm-hmm. So that's the same sort of thing I'm going to do here with Cordial. I'm not going to talk about the private stuff. That's none of my business. In terms of driving, heading into this year, not a lot of people were looking at him and thinking that he was going to absolutely hit it out of the park. But this year, he's proven that. He wasn't that brilliant when all was said and done, at least for the first half of the season. First half of the season, it was not very good. He got that race ban, which was just like, I'm actually impressed you got it that soon. Not even Mahavir got it that soon. So that completely, butchered a lot of his sort of momentum. It completely destroyed as well any sort of, in the eyes of some people, I'm not saying mine, but I'm saying in others, his sort of credentials in terms of him being there. He gets in this soon. He gets a race ban. He gets no points. What is this? So it was not a good first half of the season. Second half of the season, he started to pick it up a bit, and it was actually a bit surprising Van Amersfoort being relatively competent straight out of the box, which I'll get into the reasons why that happens soon. But, overall, it was a promising end to the season for sure. He had a decent run, especially at Abu Dhabi, where he was sort of in the mix, really, in the top 10. So I'm not going to shun that. He had some glimmers this year, for sure, but nowhere near as good as Jake Hughes, though. Jake, I think Van Amersfoort bringing in Jake Hughes was a bloody wise choice. You get in a good figurehead who knows the cars, understands cars himself, being a fantastic driver, to help develop the car, the team, help them understand the tires, car, chassis, everything. And it worked because, straight out of the box, he was thereabouts. It's a pity that he missed the season, but he did prove his worth this year, and it definitely looked as though his input helped VAR hugely.
What we've got here, Tyler, is Amaury Cordial very much likened to a 3-time Formula One world champion. Do you agree?
Well, I think that Cordial actually has been a little bit better than people give him credit for being, which I think is because of the fact that people dislike him, which is understandable. Of course, if you dislike someone, it's unlikely you're going to give them credit. I'm not going to give him credit. I'm going to say that I think that he actually was in contention for points more than he actually ended up getting because of rash decisions or something happening. Just classic Cordial behaviour, really. But regardless of that, he, as Josh mentioned, had an amazing finish to the season, which has actually given me some sort of hope in him. I've also often find that if drivers are often behaving off track, it's usually because of a combination of a bit of arrogance about the ability and then also actually not being good at the same time. If drivers like that become good eventually, like we saw with Tictum, that behaviour sort of begins to leave them. I hope that will be the case with Cordial, because with those performances, it has given me a lot of hope. Jake Hughes, I spoke to at the beginning, after the first couple of rounds, where he got disqualified from a sprint race podium. I think it was. Yes, it was in Jeddah.
Jeddah, yeah.
Of the skid plank being like 0.03 millimeters too long or something, which obviously makes zero difference whatsoever to the actual effect of the car, but logistically isn't allowed. So, and then he said that, bearing in mind that he thought he was going to stay there for the whole year, he said that he would have expected VAR to get a win by the end of the year, even if that was a sprint race. So I think that shows that VAR really have stepped in already as a sort of decent midfield team. But the lineup next year will really serve them well. So Cordial's going to be staying. That's going to be interesting. I think he actually has a chance of improving. Hopefully, he needs to start well though. And then the other seat, a bit open at the moment, I believe. And then Juan Manuel Correa, drivers like that are options. But in terms of the guys that they had to step in, for Van Amersfoort, guys like David Beckman, an F2 sort of experienced guy, sort of similar to Hughes in a way, stepped in, did well. He showed how quick the VAR car could be to Cordial, I think, which made a difference right there at sort of Spa back end of the season. And then it was nice to see Juan Manuel Correa back. I know we won't give him a rating, but it's worth mentioning for a guy who has gone through so much pain. It is a sort of, I don't want to make it seem ridiculous, but Josh mentioned Niki Lauda. It's probably a much mini version.
Exactly.
So
yeah,
massive respect to Correa, and it would be nice to see him back in F2 again. I think he has still got a bit of pace in him.
Let's go on to the scoring side of things. So going to really concentrate is weird, but because of Jake Hughes essentially leaving Formula 2 halfway through the season, but is Jake Hughes and Cordial, I think, are the drivers here that we can give ratings to. Now, Josh, you want to kick us off? Do you want to go down the Hughes route first?
Can I get the problem child out of the way?
Okay. We're flexible here. Cordial.
I'll give him a C- on the basis that the last couple of rounds were good, but there were a lot of rounds before that, and not a lot of them were good. So, yeah, I think C- is what I would do. Tyler, what do you reckon?
I was thinking I'm a bit more open to giving him a C, but C-. We said C- for Caldwell, didn't we? And I think that while Caldwell did struggle, he got a couple of points for finishes. The only thing that saved Cordial from that same sort of admonishment was those final few races, which is why I was thinking of giving him a C. But I'm happy to give him a C-, really. I think next year is where he's got to prove it. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty fair, guys. And if we didn't go down the last couple of rounds where he's kind of elevated himself up, that could have easily been an E or a D, I think, with how his season got up to that. So really has sprung on. Jake Hughes, I don't think it really matters. I don't think Jake Hughes gives a shit what we think of him. But Hughes, what would you say at this point? Because this guy's on his way to do a Formula career or a racing career away from Formula 2. But give him an A, give him an F. He doesn't care. What would you give him?
Fine, give him an F. See what he reacts like. Nah, Tyler, you go first. I got an inkling, like a sort of ballpark figure. I'm struggling with this rating in the same way that I did with Lewis Hamilton's rating. It's just like I'm up to the 11th hour now, and I'm still not quite sure what to give him. So you go, and I'll just say yes to whatever you give.
I'll give you two choices, and I'm letting you pick. I'm hoping they're going to
tell me what to do. Don't say, oh, you give two choices. This isn't Wheel of Fortune, for goodness sake. Give me an answer.
Okay, I was thinking B- on the basis that he did get a lot of unlucky happenings through the season, and I think that if he had stayed to the whole rest of the season, I think he would have probably got at least maybe another podium here or there. No, actually, I'm changing that C plus on the basis that I'm pretty sure he was on reverse grid pole in Spain for the sprint race, and he fell down so quickly. And that was just after I'd spoken to him, and he said that he thought he could win a race that year. And that really did sort of make me think, actually, I think he had as good a season as he could have had maybe at that point. I think he probably could have got some more points finishes, but I'd say maybe C plus, B minus, sort of really tough in that category, sort of right there.
In the words of Stephen A., you're wrong, and I'm going to tell you why. That made me mean. Now, the thing is, I'll just say is like, what more really could you have asked him to do in that VAR? It was a bit of an unknown quantity in the sense that, look, VAR in terms of Formula 3, I'm talking about the great Dallara, cars that they use in years gone by, or the crappy heavy one that they use nowadays that breaks people's wrists. It doesn't matter which one you use. If you would have to pick a team for Formula 3, who are you going to choose? More likely is VAR. But Formula 2 is a different kettle of fish, so to speak. First year in the game, you can't expect a million things of them, but immediately Hughes was up there. And we do expect that kind of stuff from him. But I mean, like, irrespective of times where he didn't finish in the points, which admittedly was most of the time, he still did about as well as I think he could have done in most circumstances. So to give him a C plus, I feel is a little bit of a hard, sort of hard line to give him.
Josh, you were happy giving him an F a second ago. Now
I wanted to get a rise out of him. But no, like C plus though, that's when I go, no. I can't have any of that. B minus, I feel it's just a little bit too low. I understand where you're coming from for the B minus, but I just think, we got to remember the circumstances that these drivers are in. People will be like, oh, spec series cars are all equal. I got a story to tell you, folks. Spec series, they're not quite equal. So, I don't know. I'd probably give him just a B, no plus or minus. If you want to lean to minus, sure, I guess, but in that region at least. I don't think he did bad at all this year.
As the intermediary here, it's going to be a B minus, but that's because of the fact he buggered off and wanted to play with electric things. So he's losing that kind of half point there because he didn't stick around for the full season. So Tyler's given C plus, you're talking B, then B minus is right in between that. So I think that's pretty damn fair. Next up is Trident, and Trident, as they tend to do, different Formula 2 team as they are a Formula 3 team. They had Richard Verschoor and Callan Williams all year, with a lovely cameo from last week's guest on the podcast, Zane Maloney, at the finale. A little easier to say. I think Zane, we're going to speak about a lot next year, I believe. And we like Zane Maloney, very quick driver, very nice guy. And most of all, watches a podcast, who'd have thought? So hello, Zane. But Richard Verschoor and Callan Williams, they're the drivers we're going to focus on. Where do we start then? Do you want to start on Callan Williams, Josh? Do you want to start on Richard Verschoor? Trident, take us away.
Okay. I remember I was sent a comment in the preview video. Like, I can't wait to see Callan Williams wipe the smile off of Josh's face. To that I say, touche. He wasn't a million miles into the stratosphere, but for the first couple of rounds, in Bahrain and Jeddah, he proved pretty pretty decent, pretty competent, especially when you consider that Trident is not as good as they are in F2 as they are in F3. And Richard Vershaw is his teammate. And Vershaw is a highly regarded dude and someone who I cannot for the life of me understand was dropped by Red Bull. So that's the caliber of teammate you're going up against. And he was there or thereabouts. He fell off as the season went on, which, to be honest with you, that happened as well with Vershaw. It was probably more of a team thing than an individual driver. Wasn't quite up there with Vershaw, but again, it was a bit of a hard one in terms of like Vershaw's a caliber driver. And then he buggered off, and I think he realized that this wasn't going to play much cop, which, fair play to him, like realize the realities of motor racing. But nah, like nowhere near as bad as I thought he was going to be at the start of the season. So, kudos to him in that regard. With Vershaw, I don't know, Tyler, what do you reckon?
Okay, well, just quickly, I'm pretty sure this is facts, so I really hope I'm not spreading false information on this, because that is literally what my job is to do here, is to do the opposite of that. So I'm pretty sure, though, that Vershaw was part of the decision to leave Red Bull because he didn't want the pressure, and I think that
did he? Well, I didn't know. I just woke up one day and he wasn't on the Wikipedia page.
I think he's following a similar sort of step as Drugovich, in the sense that he clearly has something there. The question is, can someone like Vershaw switch it into gear just like Drugovich has this year? That's the part that I'm not so sure about. He is 21. He has got time on his side. He has had a good year. And I think that winning the first race of the season always helps, because obviously it always gives you that sort of early boost and people remember you. And you got another, a couple of feature race podiums as well. The problem is that when he's off, he is off. It's sort of on or off with him. It's never sort of in the middle. His consistency is a major issue. So again, I think if he can get a season sorted for next year a bit earlier, that will give him a bit more time, a bit more pressure off, because that's his issue right now, is money, and it has been for a while. So yeah, I think that Vershaw has got something in him. I think he had a good year, but I think the interesting thing is I get the feeling that Trident are maybe a bit better than they're being portrayed in F2. I don't think they're as good as they are in F3, as you said, Josh, but I think they are a little bit better than they are performing as. So I think Vershaw can step up a bit further.
Callum Williams, though, Tyler, what's your thoughts on this drive? Without going into the ratings at this point, but Callum's season in 2022.
Reverse of Cordeal, I actually was really surprised by him. He was the driver that I was most surprised about in the first 3 or 4 rounds. I remember early on in the season when Callum Williams finished 4th in the sprint race in Jeddah. In the corresponding feature race, he looked really quick. And from that point onwards, it just got worse and worse, to the point where I thought to myself, did he just have some mega setup trick on his car? Because it's really weird seeing a driver start so well as a rookie and then that just vanish. I will wish a lot for him, because I think he's a really nice guy. But in terms of his season, it's sort of like Cordeal, but you could even argue that it's worse than Cordeal.
The other way around.
Yeah, it's
with Cordeal, it was a bad start, and then the last round or two were brilliant. With Williams, the first round or two were brilliant, and then the rest of it was just nowhere.
In that sort of sense, then, let's go with you as guys. Josh, would you give a very similar rating then for Callum Williams as we did for Cordeal because of that?
I don't know. It's difficult because you do get enamored by the 1 or 2 good results. The thing that is in the benefit, I say it's a reverse Cordeal. The benefit for Williams here is that he didn't get a race ban, didn't get anywhere close to one. And he did have, remember in Bahrain, where was it the feature race where he was in good position and then Trident sent him out with 3 wheels. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's the average probably is a decent rating to give him. And by the way, I didn't say my thoughts on Vershaw. Very good. That's it. Okay, Tyler, what do you...
Cut.
We gave Caldwell, a C-. We gave Cordeal a C-, basically. I think that he's in that category again.
You didn't get a race ban though. That's
something I didn't take
me.
into account with Cordeal, so maybe we F Cordeal. Just a thought.
Where are we sitting then, guys? I'm thinking C is probably fair from.
Okay, C, yeah, C.
That. Josh?
Yep. Yeah.
Not strong enough for us. For sure, though, probably worthy of higher than a C. Tyler, where are you going to put for sure with your rating?
Instant thinking, sort of B, maybe B-.
Minus. The guy had 4 podiums.
Yeah.
He had the win and then 3 other people.
I know, but it's that middle bit. He said it himself. He just said that it was just off, and that was the thing. It was, if you have the pace throughout, but the performance sort of inconsistent, you can say, well, look, he's shown it. It's just a question of avoiding silly things. But when you just have a period of, no points finishes for like 4 or 5 rounds, it becomes a bit more of an issue because you can't just do that. So I think I'd give him a B. I think a B, because I think that considering he is a driver who is kind of, so I'm surprised that he's still where he is in motorsport because of his money problem in terms of, I make that sound like he's involved in the mafia, but I mean as in his issue with having
he wasn't
money.
born into a Stroll family is what you're trying to say.
Yeah, he's certainly fighting the sort of the boundaries of motorsport, you can argue, and I think that for that sake as well, it adds a bit more pressure on him because he doesn't know what the next thing is. It could be done like that. So yeah, I'd say B for sure.
Josh?
Yeah, agreed there.
Well, that was pretty damn quick. B for sure. I think that's probably fair. I think that's pretty damn fair. Okay, let's move on because we're going to go real long on this one. And there's a team now from the Czech Republic who I would call Charouz, but
do we have to talk about these guys?
Well, hold on 1 second. But somebody scolded on from YouTube on our Formula 2 2023 video. Commented, I'm sorry, but that was the worst pronunciation of Charouz I have ever heard. Even though I'm copying what the commentators are saying, it's Charouz, but I don't know.
Trouser?
I don't know. He's trying to spell it out. KHA-ROW-Z. And I don't know what that is meant to sound like, but the team from the Czech Republic, and he says he is from the Czech Republic himself, but Charouz? I don't know. I feel like a commentator now. I don't know how to pronounce this. 1, Josh, most importantly, how would you pronounce that name? And then 2, Enzo Fittipaldi. Let's go and give this guy a pat on the back.
Yeah. How do you pronounce it? Trouser? Was it?
Charouz, maybe. I don't know.
Charouz?
Charouz, I would say.
I'll be fair to this guy. Charouz. Yeah, I don't know. There seems to be a team that seems to foster in pay drivers in F2 and F3. Like, I remember seeing some comments about their postseason test, and a lot of the comments was just like, "This is not a serious team." So it's not good when you have a lot of names in there where it's just like, okay.
Well, let me interrupt for 1 second, Josh, if I might, because we've got Enzo Fittipaldi, who's done unbelievably, one of the stars of the season, in my opinion, but I'm not going to force that on you guys. But then we also had Chembolk Bassi, who has got a very different sort of route to motorsport than a lot of people. Then what I'd call cameo appearance, David Beckman, Tatiana Calderon. We're going to move past the latter two, and we could focus a little bit, but it's really Enzo and Bollock Bassi we're going to focus on. Yeah, but Enzo Fittipaldi, and Bollock Bassi.
To come back from what he had in Jeddah, and especially the other things that were involved with him on a health side, it was, there have been some disparaging comments about Enzo this year, and with regard to saying not that special, blah 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 blah. He destroyed his teammates. You got to factor in that. It's like you left them for dead. His consistency was something else. No wins to speak of, no pole positions. But at the end of the day, he was still up until that last round, he could have gotten third in the championship, you know, and in a Charouz or a trouser or whatever you call it. But yeah, seriously though, like we have got to give him kudos in that regard. Was he the driver of the year? No, but you know, still though, you got to give credit where credit's due. I know people will be thinking, well, you know, wasn't that special? Well, I mean, he did what he needed to, and he got the results that he should have. But next year, rumored to be at Carlin with Zay Maloney, he's going to find that hard because Maloney, we know, he might, but I don't know. He is going into the lion's den a bit there. But, you know, at the same time, Carlin's got good speed. You know, they proved that this year. They got good car speed, especially in the sprint races. So he may shut me up. A couple drivers did shut me up this year. So, who knows?
Your thoughts on, well, Trouser, the team, and Fittipaldi, I suppose, mainly as the star attraction, Tyler?
Yeah, Fittipaldi had a great season. Charouz, Trouser, whatever you want to call them, they actually were a much better team than anyone would have expected from them this year. And I think even to a lot of people, they don't realise just how good they were. I think the biggest issue with saying how good Fittipaldi's season was, regardless of everything we've talked about, and he deserves a lot of credit for those things, is that because his second driver, you know, the pairing that he was with, was always below average for an F2 driver, in my opinion, it meant that we didn't get a good representation of how good he actually was, which is why I think that car was actually really quick anyway. But you don't have a season like that. You know, the thing is, he came in from F3 halfway through the season into F2 last year. When does that ever work unless it is a genuine top driver? You can't just go straight into a series adapt. Some people say the F2 car is different to the F3 one. Some people say it's not too much. My point is that it still matters if you come in and do that. And then he's done it again this season, and he is the best performing driver on the grid that hasn't won a race. And there's always that question: can he do it then, or is he always just taking advantage of opportunities he's getting? I think a bit of both. As Josh mentioned, next year with Zane Maloney, he came in and he was fighting with like guys like Novalak already straight away in Abu Dhabi. It'll be a really good opportunity to prove himself. He's also Red Bull, so there's that added element of pressure as well. We've got to remember. We saw how much he was being paraded around by Helmut Marko. I mean, some people swim, some people, some people sink. So he's got the Fittipaldi name. It should be written in the stars, but it's a question of how good it really is. That's what it's next year's about for him.
Well, half of the Fittipaldi's grid have got the Fittipaldi name, so let's not focus too much on that. But also, Chen Bollock-Bassi, we've not really touched on a sim driver doing what we all dream of doing and joining single-seater. Tyler?
I just want to just quickly on Bollock-Bassi, because there's a lot of distasteful stuff in regards to his exit and with the Charouz, bosses, and he's been pretty vocal on like Instagram and Twitter about the fact that he's going to make a return very soon, and obviously it doesn't look very likely that that's going to happen at Charouz. But he has had an amazing route, and it's, I hope, given a lot of hope to people, even if it is somewhat unrealistic in a lot of ways. I hope that it gives people hope in motorsport, because when you have people coming from a different background, it's great. It offers that sort of element of diversity that creates chaos in motorsport, which is brilliant. Whether he's actually good enough to be there, I would have liked to have seen him in F3 first. I always like to see drivers properly proving themselves. So stepping up like that, it's always going to be a hindrance. It's the biggest step we've had into F2 for a while. But he did well in Euro Formula, so fair play to him. But yeah, it's not worked out for him this year, and my grade's going to be quite low. So
normally the progression is FIA F3, and he didn't do that. So it's difficult to judge his season, really. Like, can you really be that cruel on him? Because at the end of the day, he was in no man's land. Bit of a ghost in some ways, but like, what were we expecting of him to come in and Superman the field? No. So, and then he ended up doing only half the season. So what we ended up with was sort of a half campaign that really didn't achieve a hell of a lot and didn't aid the team in much of a capacity. Meanwhile, Enzo's up there, fighting for a top 3 position in the championship. It's like the contrast is night and day. But at the same time, Enzo definitely has had that sort of experience, I guess, in a Formula 2 car, in a team, in the sort of, what do you say, in a proper progression up. Got the people around him who can help him in that regard. Versus someone who only did a half campaign in first season in the car. I don't know. It's just difficult to sort of adjudicate how Bolabassi's season was.
Is he going to be around that kind of C- level? Is that where we're thinking it's going to land? Are we going lower, higher?
I think C-. Yeah.
Tyler, concur?
My bad. I was on mute. I was thinking D. I think, could we say D+? Because I really don't think I can give him a C. It was a nice fairy tale story coming into the season. I think it's definitely not gone anywhere near that since then. So I think, can we say D+ for that?
Yeah, and just we talk. we're talking about the fairy tale entry into the season. Esports to Formula 2. It's not quite that simple. There's not many drivers who you can legitimately say went from esports to racing. There's a lot of asterisks and a lot of those stories.
Yeah, I think we will get a sim racer at some point in the future, but I just don't think that's been what Bolabassy has been this year. And I think we all really wanted him to be that driver, right? Because that kind of represents us, the everyman, who we try to think, I could be a Drugovich myself if only I had the money to do so. So, yeah, I think we're going to.
Hey, we still got Jimmy Broadbent.
And he's doing it, in all fairness to Jimmy as well. We like Jimmy, that he's kind of doing it right. He's doing it slower. He's not going to say Formula 2, I'm going to jump straight into that. And he's proving that it's possibly a thing to do. Just Formula 2 isn't the way to go about it. But I think D+ is pretty damn fair. But Fittipaldi, let's go down that route, Josh. Fittipaldi, like you say, not the best driver of the year. He didn't get a win, but a bit of a surprise package, I'd say.
B+. I don't really have much to add to that, really.
Oh, you've spoken.
Go on, give him an A. Give him an A.
Tyler, B+, are we thinking?
My thought was literally A-, B+. The question is, how did you think of Fittipaldi before the season? If you thought of him, not that much, then A-. If you thought of him a bit more, maybe, then B+. I'm going to give him an A-, just because I think that he might have a bit of a tough year next year. So want to give him as much love as possible for what is going to be a very, very important in his career.
You just know that he's going to turn up to the first round, and if he doesn't get a pole position, Marco's going to call him up and ask, "What is this? You're in Liam's old car, and you should be getting top results."
Yeah,
because we know that Marco is historically extremely tough on his talents.
It's either B+ or A-. Josh, I think you're the one who's got the casting vote, particularly here, because Tyler's happy with either.
Yeah. So, rating for 30. Yeah, B+. I'll stick with that.
I think we can lock that in. Okay, getting into the sharp end now. Virtuosi, P7, 134 points. So, pretty decent year. Most of those scored by a certain Australian who has really shone, Jack Doohan, ended up finishing P6, few wins. And then we've got, as I've typed, Marino Sato. So Virtuosi have just kind of slipped, I feel. They've slipped in prestige almost from where they were. They had a pretty stellar lineup last year before. Now they're midfield. Jack, I believe, isn't necessarily the reason for that, but let's call a spade a shovel. We've got here a pay driver and we've got here a talent. And this is kind of P7 where you end up when you've got that top and the bottom, I believe. This is where we go into the between. But we're looking at the drivers more specifically, Josh. Marino Sato, Jack Doohan, your thoughts on their 2022?
I'll get doing out of the way. Dumber than a box of rocks.
We can't do that again.
No, we can't do that again. No, that was an inside joke which should not have been said. But like in reality, we saw what he did last year. And it's just like, okay, this kid can go places.
Just let me for a second, for anybody who doesn't know what's going on here. In the F2 preview, I didn't do anything. I liked Jack doing it. And then we had Josh Revell coming on and almost tarnishing the F1 Feeder Series reputation by calling Jack doing dumber than a box of rocks, while also complimenting him at the same time. And the only way that only Josh Revell can do. And Josh Revell, almost blacklisted Jack doing from F1 Feeder Series of the podcast. Took a bit of
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thanks, took a bit of fighting for him to come back on, but massive Jack doing fans. He's done really well. So Josh, please.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing that as a Kiwi you don't want to see is an Aussie doing good. But I've got to give credit where credit's due. Jack was fantastic this year. I was at Spa when he won the feature race. It was fantastic drive, and especially against some of the guys this year with what they've had, and he's just way outshone his teammate. Quite unlucky at some stages this year. Was it at Jeddah? He had the crap at the restart. He was just rammed into. Abu Dhabi, where the team sent him out on a tricycle. But apart from that, like, how many races did he win this year?
Let me go and count with thanks to Wikipedia for this. We got
Wikipedia, the most reliable sense of information.
The sprint race at Silverstone, the feature race in Hungary. No, the sprint race in Hungary, my bad. The feature race in Spa. We had a double podium because he got the P2 as well in the sprint race, which you saw. So pretty damn good year.
It was a damn good year. And, if you were to have to talk about rookies, he's extremely close with the one that finished highest of all the rookies, but still, goddamn, he was strong this year. And Victor Martin is a fantastic talent, but Dylan's going to be pressing for the Alpine seat hard, and he deserves that. He deserves that shot at Formula One because it's just been fantastic this year. He proved me wrong. I didn't think he was that much cop. A couple of years ago. I will bugger off. I don't. I was definitely wrong in that regard. Kudos, Jack. It was a bloody good season, man. Fantastic. So that I'm dumber than a box of rocks. As for the other dudes, I'll just briefly get on to the other dude because this won't take long. Marino Sato. No. Tyler.
Marino Sato. He's one of those drivers that just is going to be a footnote in F2 history. And he's not someone who clearly doesn't belong in the series, but this year he was in his third full season, 2 at Trident, his first at Virtuosi. As Jim, you said at the beginning, Virtuosi have been a good team for a few years now. Jack illustrates how good they are. And even Jack, as I'll get onto, should have scored way more points than he eventually did. Yeah, he's just not been on it at all. And there's the worry that he will be returning for another year.
No. Marino Sato, P22, 6 points this year, just to add some context to what we're talking about this year. In
6? Bloody hell, did he get that many?
Yeah, P8, P8, and a P10. And then the rest of it, either retirements or not top 10 positions.
Wow.
Not good enough. And the thing is, right, I spoke to Dylan about halfway through the year, maybe a bit into the second half. And something I asked him had really stuck with me. And it was about the fact that obviously having a second teammate as a rookie in an F2 car who is clearly off the pace compared to you is such a distraction when it comes to understanding your pace. You come straight in from F3, you look like a title contender from the first weekend, and your teammate is basically doing the same thing every weekend, which is like really unhelpful to him. And he was trying to be as nice as possible to Marino, because I'm sure he gets on well with him. I'm sure Marino's not a bad person. Problem is, though, is he's not a great driver. And when you've got someone like Dylan, who really is sort of F1 quality in the making, having Sato is really actually hampering him and hurting him. I think it's going to make Doohan work for it that bit more, which maybe down the line will be a benefit to him. But yeah, Doohan should have got a lot more points this year because of that, and also because of the fact that the man couldn't deal with how quick he was in qualifying by just giving it a bit of space in the race. He's so on it all the time. Maybe it's a thing of his, because of his dad, I don't know, but he clearly wants it so bad. And we love to see emotional drivers and all that sort of stuff, but I hope he learns. I hope he's learned his lesson in the back end of this year, where he's begun to, as we said about that feature race win in Spa, was a really, really nice thing for him to finally get. He nearly retired from 2 poles, and if he wants to win a title, which might define him getting a seat in F1, he will need to stop doing that and convert it like Drugovich did this year.
I think from my perspective, I had Doohan kind of pegged in that sort of Tictum level of very emotional driver. Like you say, he wants it so bad that it's almost spilling out into the radio, into what you see him driving. I mentioned in the Inside F2 podcast for their season finale, he seemed to calm down. When it was just like the team said, sorry, we gave you, as Josh called it, like, we gave you a tricycle. He didn't seem pissed off about it. He seemed like, oh, come on, guys. It wasn't the anger. And I feel like there's a massive level of maturity for him coming from where he was around the start of the year. And that puts him in such good stead. Like the Doohan Porsche, presumably 2023 fight with Behrman possibly and whoever else, that is what I'm signed up for, because those 2 drivers, Doohan and Porsche, I think are those ones who are looking at F1. Victor Marta, I don't know. Like, this is where we're saying next year, we're doing the Ferrari. Next year is going to be our year. But I do think Doohan is probably a 2023 title contender. But let's try and get through, because we're going to have the longest podcast in history. And I'm not just talking the F1 Features podcast, just podcasts in general. Josh Revell, you say no for Marino Sato, but what would you give in terms of a score?
D. Tyler?
Yeah, D- you could even argue. He's close to it. It's the fact that he's been in there for a while. It's like, come on.
He's been in there for a while. This is not his first rodeo, and he's in a Virtuosi, which is like, dude, this is not a Campos. Like, come on. Like, there is no cushion for this guy. There is no bloody excuse. Like, no, that's it.
Yeah. So yeah,
done.
D- minus. We're happy with that. Move on from Sato, please. Doohan.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's stick with a D for Sato. We think Sato's a nice guy, but like I say, separating the driver from the person, I think D is a fair representation of his season. But Jack Doohan, that's not a D. This is a driver who is one of the stars of Formula 2, I think. Absolutely not dumber. D for dumber than a box of rocks. He is friend of the podcast, bloody good driver, top bloke. What do you want to give him, Josh?
F. Nah, he'll get
F for fucking good.
Exactly. Nah, he was just He's in the A's. I'm not sure what to give him though.
Tyler, potentially you can help out here.
Definitely not an A plus. I think he's made way
not quite there.
The question is, again, how did you view him coming into the season? Because he had a really good finish to the season last year, where he actually properly battled with Hauger for 3 or 4 rounds. He got that feature his victory in F3 at Spa as well. When the Alpine situation came into effect with Piastri and that seat was up, his name got thrown in, and he was performing at that point of the year, which I think deserves a massive amount of credit. My worry, all right, is ironically, as someone who switched from Red Bull when Red Bull had loads of drivers, now they're sort of dropping him off a bit. He's now stuck at Alpine where everyone else is going, and he's at the top of the line. But look who they've got. They've got 2 drivers who are probably, I mean, unless obviously we have a massive Ocon-Gasly head-on collision, they might be around for a couple of years. That's going to be a problem for Doohan in his career. This year, though, I'd say A. I'd say A.
I'll go with that. A, straight A.
If it wasn't for the sort of crashing and maybe being a bit over the top in aggressiveness, I think he genuinely could have been up higher than Porsche, which would have been an amazing achievement.
Dams, P6, 161 points. Ayumu Iwasa, a driver I did not expect to be really praising as highly as he are, finished ahead of Jack Doohan in the standings in the end. The second top rookie, only 7 points behind Logan Sargeant in the end. We've also got to talk about Roy Nissany, who had another Roy Nissany-esque season. Dams, yeah, the midfield's been very much a midfield team for a little while, possibly not fulfilling their potential. Iwasa, though, did show what the Red Bull Junior team should be about, with having very quick drivers you don't expect doing well. Josh Revell, two drivers again, who one high, one not so high. The team end up therefore around the midfield.
Start off with Iwasa. Extremely good season. I did not expect him to be doing as well as what he did. Not to say that I underestimated him in terms of like he was just a bit of a merchant of years that gone by. It was a case of like we had so many drivers coming into this year who looked the goods, and especially with Red Bull backing, and in a lot of ways he was a better Red Bull driver this year. So you take all of that, it being his debut year, and it was just impressive as hell. I wouldn't necessarily say unlucky not to get top 3, because if you have a look at people down the championship ladder, there was a lot of bad luck being thrown around. But, irrespective, we're going to judge individually here. Fantastic season. Heading into next year, you got to think he's going to be in with a good chance, because Dams aren't a bad team. They can hook up a car pretty damn well. And he executed it well. And unlike a lot of the hot guns that came through from Japan, he's not someone that necessarily oversteps the mark a lot of the time. It's actually good, consistent driving without a lot of mistakes, which is something that you want to see out of a Japanese driver, because I feel that's sort of been the Achilles heel of some of the prospects that have come to Europe, is sometimes they will be extremely fast, but be a bit more mistake prone than others, which would just be a damper. But Iwasa's not that way, which is great to see. As for Nissany has got some speed to him, but he's a maniac. And there's been times this year, I think, was it Bahrain, where he was just going on track, off track, just going everywhere. Not understanding the boundaries of the track while darting in and out, battling with other people. It's like, this guy's going to cause a freaking accident. And Silverstone, that incident with Helga, where he just threw him off the track and bloody well had the car come over his head. It's like, Halo's not there. You're not here either. It may sound like I'm being unfair to the dude, but I'm not really. I understand what he has there. People don't want to see it because he caused so many accidents, like Maldonado. Like Maldonado could hustle a car if he wanted to, but he just had that issue of being allergic to finishing races. Nissany has that same kind of thing. He just needs to calm the frick down, because it hampered him this year badly when it didn't need to. And we saw in Abu Dhabi that he's got some speed. So, no, I don't know. It was an extremely hot and cold season from Nissany, whereas from Iwasa, it was just like we just saw potential quite a lot of the time. And France, in particular, I thought was a fantastic win from him. So, yeah. Tyler?
Iwasa was a breath of fresh air this year. Really was. My most favourite driver of the year. If it wasn't for how good Drugovich this was, I'd actually consider giving him an A+, because of the fact that I think he's come from such a low expectation. The bottom of the 5 Red Bull juniors coming into this year, we are including Vips in that, that he genuinely probably had the best year in terms of where you want them to be. He exceeded it, and no other Red Bull driver did. Even Lawson, I think, was probably on expectation, you could argue, maybe slightly below. Iwasa really did have a great season. And if it wasn't for the fact that, again, just took obviously a little bit of time, but not even that much time when you consider it, a team like Dams, which hasn't really experienced so much in the last couple of years, I think that he really took them back up and where they wanted to be with their new management as well, with Charles Peak. So lovely to see Iwasa there. Nissany, I think he's going next year, which will be interesting because I don't know what will happen. I feel like if we lose Nissany from the sport, will it go under? But he had the biggest, I think the biggest, apart from maybe when Raghunathan blocked Monaco, biggest meme moment in recent history, that Imola crash where he was genuinely well on favourite for a feature race victory. On pace, really, when you consider drivers like Yuri Vips made massive mistakes and crashed out, he then does it in a really embarrassing way. And I spoke to him before Abu Dhabi, and he said that it still haunts him. And it's interesting because you never really think about drivers like that, or what happens after. But I think that and the Hauger crash that he had has actually calmed him down. But I think it's way too late for him, so shame. But yeah, that Imola crash was one of the most tragic things I've seen in Formula 2 history.
Let's go on scores then. Let's start with Roy. Tyler, you were just talking about him. Where would you give him in terms of our grading system?
I'd say a C plus. C minus. I think that he's been in the game long enough, so that's why he's made progression. He has made progression, which is why he's not a D. But yeah, like the fact that he was in good positions at times this season and he didn't convert shows that he's clearly still not at that level. So I think so.
Josh, you're deep in thought there with your thoughts for Nissany's.
Yeah, like I'm trying to think of the races that he did and what he was doing pace wise and what he could have done, all that kind of witchcraft stuff. But at the same time, you got a good sort of good level to measure yourself up against. It's his teammate. Was he near his teammate this year? That's the answer to your question. Was it really? I don't know what I said there. I hope it sounded like English. But
it makes sense. It wasn't Iwasa. That's fair to say.
Yeah. So I think I might have to agree on the C minus there because I'll reiterate this again. I understand the guy's potential. He's not a slow driver. He was his own worst enemy a lot of the time. And if one's being completely honest, he wasn't quite on the level of Iwasa. Then again, Iwasa proves, I won't say he proved a lot of people wrong. He just exceeded a lot of expectations this year. So, yeah, C minus for Nissany.
Yeah, I think that's a fairly fair representation of his year. Iwasa, meanwhile, Tyler, you were saying potentially the star of the season, if not for Drugovich. You were looking at an A, I think you said. Josh, do you think that's fair?
Yes. By the way, when I was talking about the Japanese drivers there coming in and sort of just being error prone, I was more referring to Formula One drivers. Like we saw, for example, like you take Takuma Sato, for example. There's just one example, and he would have moments of just great speed, and then next thing you know, he just hurled into a wall in just the weirdest way possible. It's just such a shame because that there are drivers like Naoki Yamamoto and Tomoki Najiri, and you see them over there. It's just like, why didn't they go over there? Ratomo Miata as well. They didn't get over there. They didn't even race in Europe, let alone try out Formula One. So it's frustrating knowing that the consistency can be there for those drivers. Tsunoda had a rough, beginning to it all, I guess. Just crashing into his own teammate, and Silverstone was not a good start. But Iwasa wasn't prone to any of that.
I remember, Josh Revell, when you were on the podcast at the start of the season, we came to Hitech, and I said Marcus Armstrong and Yuri Vips. And then you said Marcus Armstrong, Yuri Vips, Hitech, like it was the most unlucky trio of names that you could put together. I think we can summarize their season away from the obvious thing with certain Yuri by the pit stops this team have put out, and therefore the amount of points they've thrown away. And I don't know if that's misfortune or what. Unfulfilled potential would be my summary of this team, with a pretty A-star lineup who then didn't have an A-star performance. Am I being harsh here, or is that a fair summary of the Hitech team for 2022, Josh? If you're listening, watching, Josh almost fell off his chair there.
those two poor guys, like, yeah, describe them as just being sort of curse magnets. They were this year. And I mean, like for Yuri Vips this year at the start of this whole sort of year, what like on pace he just looked on it, you know, like all the way up to Baku on pure pace, he looked like the one who could challenge Drugovich with the title. Then after Baku, the incident happened. I'm not saying the two are directly linked here, but after that, it just like momentum stopped. Like for whatever reason, he didn't have that killer pace that he did before. And you can put it down to the incident or the fact that at Baku when he lost that race, that wasn't down to a Mechachrome moment. That was all him. He just threw the race away, and that's when you're leading a race. And I know Hauger was right behind him, but he had a 2-second buffer. He was relatively managing the gap. You could argue that Dennis was catching up to him, but still to throw that away. And at the end of the day, second is better than nothing at all. Threw away a lot of points. You could argue that at that point he was starting to go out of contention for the championship. It was just crap to see that, you know, like.
Not before we go on this, we also had the incidents at Imola. I think the feature race, and then also
throwing that away.
He threw multiple wins. Multiple high-scoring positions away.
Well, yeah, because I don't know if he was going to win Imola, put it that way. But it's still points, you know. At the end of the day, Sargeant and Lawson were separated by 1 point, wasn't it?
Mm. Yeah.
Now, if you think of the stuff that happened throughout the year, you could just say, "Oh, this cost him the championship. That cost him." It's like it's a championship. It's 11 rounds, Formula 2. In my opinion, when it comes to like championships or games, saying, "Oh, we lost because of this, that," it's like if you were the better one, you shouldn't have been there in the first place. You know, more often than not. Although this season was kind of different. So Vips threw away X amount of points, which was, you know, relatively unforgivable, especially how he did those things. As for Marcus Armstrong, he's sort of like a little bit under the radar because for a while he was in contention for, you know, good results. He was well positioned in the championship. It's like, okay, what the hell? Okay, I guess consistency's on your side. But then again, like,
it's year number 3 for Armstrong in the championship, you know?
Hey, what was that? Sorry?
It's year number 3 for Marcus in the championship this year. And that, for me, was what I looked down on him for that because you have Drugovich in year 3 battling for the lead. Where did he finish in the championship in the end? 13th.
Yeah, I understand that. But we do know, like, as we said before, it's not quite equal. You judge against your teammate. So how did he do against Vips?
He lost against Vips. Vips, P11, 114 points. Marcus Armstrong,
he did
93.
Yeah. I know. But like relatively, he wasn't like being smoked.
True.
He's just not quite on that level. But you know, he's given up on F2. It seems like he's bound for IndyCar, which I think will serve him well. You know, he should do well there. Which, you know, it'd be a nice change of pace out of coming from a series where he's just being served lemons. So yeah, I don't know. It's just like a lot of potential for Hitech this year, and it sort of just in the end of it eventuated to nothing. At the start of the year, like after the first couple of rounds, would you have expected Vips and Armstrong to finish in the end where they did?
Not at all, no. And this is generally where I think about the unfulfilled potential. The potential of that team on paper, to me, at the start of this season was like, this is one that could battle for the championship, both in drivers and teams. And it just never really worked out. Tyler, I really like when we was on the podcast, Vips was such a good guy to talk to. Marcus is not joined this podcast, but it's brilliant to watch on another podcast, a rival podcast. On the racetrack, hasn't worked out for them this year. Bloody good blokes again, but yeah, talk us through their year.
Vips' season has been the definition of painful to watch. When you have a driver that's so talented, who was at the beginning, as Josh said, the top of the Red Bull stable, and then ends up the season apart from that, you realise that something must. The point is that it's not just a case of what happened. I don't think. I think Red Bull realised that Vips was a driver who had so much potential, but might not have been able to have the capacity to control what was holding him back. He admitted earlier in the season to me that he had an issue with his aggression in terms of that he found it difficult to reserve himself in races, in positions where he could see points, a podium victory. He just was gunning so hard for it because he believed that he had the ability to do that he just pushed it over the edge. We mentioned with Nassani about his crash in Imola. Vips did it just the same. You could argue Vips was even worse because of the fact that it's Yuri Vips. This is a guy who has won races before, who has or should have won way more races. But the point is that Vips' season has been one of real frustration for anybody who wants people with talent to get to the top. And then when he did what he did, it hit him not only where it hurts in terms of the relationship with Red Bull, but it also hit him mentally as well in terms of he didn't bounce back. And you're right, Josh, when you say that it happened at a time that completely correlates with the rest of the season he had. He obviously began to pick it up again towards the end, got that podium in Monza, but by then it's too late, and his focus was already way off to America. Just literally towards the top of the list of drivers who should be in F1 but aren't. And the way it happened and why he was cut off means that he will probably be forgotten to a degree, I think, which at the start of the year you wouldn't even thought of that.
Marcus, Josh, I don't even know where to put either of these drivers. I'm really fascinated.
I don't either.
You guys are thinking.
You think I do? I don't know where to put Marcus because he didn't necessarily do much wrong, but I can't exactly give him an A+ for that, can't I? B- maybe.
Tyler?
I think you can't give Armstrong anything higher than a C+ on the basis that you can't live off sprint races for a year. It doesn't work like that. At some point, you have to say, I can pass you in a feature race, because that was why Armstrong has struggled recently, is because of the fact that he's capable once he's at the front of holding the lead. But in terms of coming through the pack, it seems like there's an issue in that regard. And I just don't think I can give him a B-. I'd say C+, I think.
Josh, this will be the last time possibly we'll speak about Marcus on the Feeder Series podcast in terms of being in the Feeder Series. Do you think C+ is where we're going to end this guy's Feeder Series career?
It's hard. It's really, really difficult to judge. Just, yeah. Because I don't know. I'm in that sort of like, it could be B-, it could be C+. So I'm not saying I'm going to give him a C+. All I'll say is that Tyler's got more than a point.
Yeah. Okay, well, put a C+ on with a caveat that Josh has got his nationality bias, I'm going to call it. No nationality bias on Yuri Vips. Yeah. Yuri Vips, let's keep off-track activities separate. And to be fair, there's something equally controversial throwing it away on-track activities from this year. Tyler, where are we going to pay him? He's around the same level, I think.
I've got to be honest. I don't know if I'm grading it slightly differently here. Also, just interesting to note that both of them are looking to go to Indy next year as a sort of together. So it's interesting to see how their futures will go. But for Vips, I actually can't give him the same as Armstrong. And even though Vips had the better season and is the better driver, in my opinion, the catastrophe that was his season in terms of what could have been. I mean, I've got a Twitter thread here that I've just been reading, and basically it says that without the main issues that he had in the season, he would have finished pretty much on par with what Drugovich ended up getting, which just shows you how good his season could have been if he just had a clean year. I've got to give him like a C- maybe. It's so disappointing. I can't give him it for how well he started. The drop off is so bad. that it really does haunt it for me.
That is harsher than I expected. Josh, your thoughts?
Damn, you really, really hurt him. Bloody
Kick a man when
Lord.
he's down, Tyler.
No, it's not so much kicking a man when he's down, it's kicking a man when he's freaking dead. That's how bad it is. Yeah, it was a catastrophic season. Absolutely piloted into a hillside. That's how bad the season was. But we saw the potential. You know, we saw the speed that he had, which is why it's difficult to throw him down that low. C average.
Tyler, you're nodding there. So I think C's fair. We kind of upped. Yeah, I think that's fair. This is the Hitech as a whole.
Yeah, I'm right. Let's move on.
We want to go quicker, guys, but we're looking at PREMA next, so P4, and I'm pretty sure both of you are going to have a few things to say. 241 points. Dennis Hauger, F3 champion coming into this year, following in the footsteps of an F3 champion of Oscar Piastri going to PREMA. Jehan Daruvala, a guy reunited with PREMA and looking to make his mark, ends up making his mark with P7 in the standings. Ahead of his teammate, though. Kind of only just. Was not the season for PREMA that I think anybody was expecting, Josh. P4 actually surprised me that they finished that high in the end. Take it away. I don't know where you want to start on either of the drivers, but this was not a PREMA domination in F2.
No, they haven't really, I don't know. They're very hot and cold in F2, aren't they? They'll have some lukewarm years, and then they'll be the best team out there. They were not the best team out there this year, that's for sure. As for the drivers, start with Hauger first. Slow start, some mistakes were creeping in, which you could expect out of a rookie, I guess. Can't be too harsh on him. He began to find his feet gradually. There was some promise there. Some good performances, such as Monaco and Baku, for example. He was getting there ever so slowly, showing a bit more potential than what Daruvala was. You could argue that. This is just my sort of perspective on why I'm seeing things here. I could see either argument. Next year with MP Motorsport, and what effectively is Drugovich's car, and knowing Hauger's track record of being nowhere one season and just coming back and Supermaning the field, you got to look at him as one of the title favorites next year, potentially. Then you got to wonder, where does that leave Red Bull? Because now you got multiple candidates, but Marco's mind changes so frequently. One minute he's saying Liam's not in the frame for a seat, the next one he's saying he is. One minute he's saying Isaac Hadjar is the future of the team, and the next minute he's not talking about him at all. And Hauger was sort of up and down with his opinion. It's like, where do you stand with these damn drivers, Marco? He seems to be sort of living in the moment. If Hauger can win F2 next year at just the right time, you never know. So, learning year for him, for sure. It had some good moments. Would say it was not the perfect season, though. As for Daruvala, underwhelming. And that's where I'm just going to leave it.
Tyler, I know a lot of people watching will be very interested to hear your thoughts on Daruvala. Josh summarized it perfectly with underwhelming. I don't think anyone could really argue with that. Not what a lot of people would have hoped for, I think. A lot of people thinking he went to PREMA could have been a title contender, a lot of experience under his belt. It didn't work out that way.
No, not so. I think underwhelming is probably even an understatement. I think he's a Red Bull junior who's had a couple of tests with McLaren, and you don't know whether to put him in the category of, is he sort of buying those tests or is he actually getting them on merit, because of the fact that ultimately he is a Rebel Junior. He has won sprint races and finally achieved his first feature race. By the way, I love probably my favourite thing of the entire year, that the weekend that Drugovich got his first win of the season and Drugovich got his first feature race win of his F2 career was the same weekend that Drugovich clinched the title, meaning that neither of those things were at all covered. I had to write multiple pieces that Monza weekend about how good Drugovich was, and I did feel really bad for them too, because it just means that like even your best moment of your season is just shadowed by someone else's greatness that could have been and should have been you. Daruvala, who I keep calling Daruvala, so I apologise for the name switching, but he was expected to be a champion this year, really, if he was going to make it to F1. I think that's over now. It's again interesting to see that he's supposed to be with MP again next year with Hauger. Interesting to see two drivers, both with PREMA, who in the last 2-3 years have been by far dominant, have a really bad year, and then switch to MP, who obviously had a really good year this year. So you don't really see that, especially from PREMA to MP. So very odd. I've got to be honest, I feel like my feelings about Daruvala are pretty limited, only on the basis that I think he's a good driver, but sort of similar level as someone like Luca Giotto, someone who wins races, will give you a fight, will nick wins and podiums off of other drivers who maybe need it more than them in their career, but I don't think it will get him anywhere in terms of F1. I think he's capable elsewhere.
Following on from Hitech in a way, two drivers possibly expected more, especially with the team they're in. Dennis Hauger, Josh, where do we put this guy? F3 champion coming in, ends up finishing P10 in the standings.
Once I stop fighting with my pop filter, I can give you an answer. I'll say B-.
Tyler?
For Hauger, actually, I'm not going to be too harsh on him. I saw enough to make me think that he can rebound back. Also, PREMA this year, a really interesting thing to note is 2 years previous to this, so 2020 and 2021, PREMA won both the drivers and the team's titles for both those seasons. Come into this one with an F3 champion and Daruvala, who's got so much experience and supposedly talent. They have this sort of season. And then next year, they've got a really strong lineup. So it's like the better they do next year, the lower they are ranked now, really, because it will show that it might have been them and their struggle to adapt. I'm going to say for Hauger, I'm going to say B-. I'm going to say.
That's 2 B-. I think that's pretty fair. Daruvala, though, Tyler?
C+. C+. The consistency is the one thing that saved him from an otherwise very embarrassing year. And the last thing I have to say on him is the fact that he could have been a great hope for India. And ultimately, yes, he finished 3 places above his teammate in the standings, but it was only 11 points, which in F2 terms is literally nothing. So I think, yeah, it's over for him. This was his chance. This was his year. It hasn't worked out for whatever reason, and I think C+ is the most I'm going to get for that.
Josh?
Yeah, ditto. Let's move on.
Fair enough. Let's move on. This team, ART, curse of the second seat is over. P3 in the standings, 281 points. Could have been teams champions. They've got a vice champion in Teo Pourchaire. They've got potentially a Formula 2 title contender in Frederick Vesey leaving the team, going to PREMA, but eventually came good around the middle of the season. Comes on the podcast, turns his season around, just saying. Josh, pretty good for ART.
Depends on how you look at it. It's good that they don't have that second seat curse anymore, I guess you could say, because Vesey was showing his worth, even if it wasn't quite up to where Teo was. But, I can't really undermine what Vesey did this year. It was some good performances, a little bit under the radar in some ways. I'm not big on the hype on him. I'm not someone that looks at this guy as if he's the future star in F1. Not even the most excited person, not even the most excited I am for a driver in that academy, so to speak. But No, can't score the season too much. I think he just did about what you might have expected him, probably a little bit less. But yeah, I'm kind of a bit lukewarm on him. As for Porsche, he came in with the legend of John Henry's hammer. I think a lot of us thought he was going to win. And after that first season, I was just thinking, you see, I know what I'm talking about. We know what we're talking about. He's going to go up to win. It's going to be a boring last few rounds, but, still, the right person is winning this championship. Fell down like a blimmin' brick. I'm not going to hinge at all on reliability, but some of the reliability this year was just a joke. I remember I was at Spa, and I was just halfway around the track trying to walk around to the bus stop during the F2 race. Watched start at Blanchimont, then walked away to the bus stop, and halfway around the track, I just hear over the intercom, Teo Portier had an engine failure. It's like, really? Damn, that's the first time that happened this year. You think about the points that he lost. Would it have been enough to eclipse Drugovich in the championship?
101 points in the end.
That's a lot of points, and you're hinging all of his retirements on that, and you're betting that all of the retirements were from winning positions, which they were not. So that's a big leap to say that would have been it. Well, what it did do was that it robbed him of some chances to get up there. And you got to remember, by the halfway point of the season, by Hungary, he was still in with a shot. So it was disappointing as all hell in that regard. It wasn't a 10 out of 10 season, put it that way.
Fair to call it that. Tyler, Porsche vice champion, Vesti ends up in P9. Your thoughts?
I'll go with Vesti first because I think Porsche is the more difficult one. I think I'm in the camp of people that actually rate Vesti. I don't think the reason why he's rated by some is because of his Mercedes link, although obviously that will help. They're the most mysterious of all of the academies, not only because of Mercedes history in F1, but also because of the fact that they don't have that many people, or certainly didn't a couple of years ago. As Josh mentioned, he's not the most hyped of their academy members, but he is responsible for a lot of work in regards to sim stuff with Mercedes. So he's involved there. It's not like he's just tagged along. He genuinely is in their system. Also, he had such an amazing time with PREMA in Freca, and then had a strong first rookie year in F3. I think that was what has given him a bit of a legacy at the moment. I think it was definitely a good year for him from where it started. When it was 3 rounds in, I genuinely thought that he was going to be one of the worst drivers of the season because of how far he was off compared to Porsche. But overnight, it seemed to switch. And then by sort of halfway, 2/3, 3/4 of the season, there were parts where Vesti was actually out-qualifying Porsche by a decent margin, and converting over him and scoring more points than them in rounds that obviously Porsche needed because of the championship. He wanted to keep himself in there. So I think Vesti's had a good year. I'm going to give him a B, I think. Maybe, yeah, I'm going to give Vesti a B. I think it was pretty much on par with what I wanted from him.
Okay, so we've got Porsche to come, but B, let's click on the scoring here. Josh, are we thinking B is fair?
B average for Vesti, B plus for Porsche.
Okay, so yeah, that makes sense. But Tyler, then, your thoughts on Mr. Vice Champion Porsche?
I think Porsche, a driver who is still 19 years old. If it wasn't for Fred Vasseur possibly jumping ship to Ferrari and rumours, when we had Teo on the podcast, the other week, and we asked him about, does that worry him? And he said yes, pretty openly. That he knows that his career is on the line pretty much every single month, regardless of the fact that he's only 19. He's very aware of the situation that he's in, that he's got all this talent, but still needs a route, and his route might not be one of the most open compared to some of the guys in F2. This year, I think it has actually hurt him a bit. The legacy he had at the beginning of the year was the youngest pole sitter in F1 history at Monaco, and the youngest feature race. F2, sorry, yeah, and the youngest feature race winner in F2 history at Monaco. he came into this year expected to be one of the quickest drivers in qualifying. Sort of the way that Doohan's season was exactly how Pourchaire's season should have been in terms of the qualifying. It was really, really not that case. And that was what hurt him. Drugovich consistently, even if he was sort of P10 with a couple of minutes to go, Drugovich would get back up to like P3, P4. Pourchaire always seemed to struggle in the pressure. I'm sure having the engine failures really hampers you. I'm going to say A- on the basis that, yes, he's had a bad season, but at the end of the day, P2 in the championship is still a good sign for him. He's made a bit more progress, maybe not as much as I wanted him to, but I think that he's P2 in the championship. And regardless of the rest of the grid maybe not being as great as it could have been in other years, him maybe finishing a bit further down, you can only do what's in front of you. So in that regard, I think I'd say A-.
Josh, happy to go up to an A- for Teo?
I wouldn't argue against it.
I'd happily come down to B+, to be fair. I think it's one of those ones where some people say that he's actually had a good season because of the engine stuff. I think that's over the top. But he hasn't had a bad season as well. So it's just how you look at it.
I like Teo. I like Teo a lot. I think vice champion, it's coming in with what we said about where do you expect him to be? And I think a lot of people I think all three of us were saying Teo's going to be champion by the end of the year. So we're all kind of disappointed by that. But if we're actually looking at it fairly nothing key, this guy's vice champion, Tyler.
Just going to say, also important to mention next year for him. He said that he was going to go to Super Formula. Oh, no, sorry, not Super Formula, but he said he was going to not be in F2 next year, which obviously linked him to Super Formula and the test that he supposedly had. I asked him about that. He said that it's not happening. We asked him about it on the podcast. He said that it was a rumor that someone had made up. Obviously, drivers not always 100% reliable, but it looks like F2 is where he's going to be with ART again and Victor Martins as his teammate, F3 champion. So that's going to be an interesting team, all French. And you'd expect Pourchaire to be the favourite because of the situation he's in now.
I'm going to say with this one, and speaking of this year, A-. I'm happy with A-. You guys happy with A-? So A- there. Okay, so Carlin, P2 in the standings, 297 points, the most even of the drivers in the championship. Lawson finishes 1 point ahead with 149 points of F1 bounds. Logan Sargeant with 148 points. Pretty good. I mean, Drugovich flew away with the championship. These guys almost on the tail of Pourchaire in the end. They're almost this kind of team, like, this is what's expected. This is the team I think both drivers actually fulfilled kind of where they needed to be. You may have different thoughts on this with the, as you called it before, the passport side of things. Josh, I'd be interested to hear what you think about a driver who's not won many championships heading to Formula One and a driver who had high hopes for Formula One, being a reserve driver from your nation. Carlin, F2, 2022.
Well, being a Kiwi, you guessed it right. Logan was a better driver this year. No, well, I mean, I make no boasts that I want Liam in Formula One. Absolutely. Is he worthy of being in Formula One? Absolutely. But this year, you'd be hard pressed to argue Liam was a better driver than Logan. And I say that in that it was close. They were both bloody good. The thing that killed Liam's season for me was his damn qualifying sometimes. Like, you can't afford to be that far down the grid, knowing full well that the car can be further up because your teammate's doing it in his rookie season. So qualifying really, really hurt him this year. His race pace was pretty damn good a lot of the time. So that kind of saved his results as well. Some of the luck was crap, with regards to just general unluckiness, whatever you want to call it. That Logan had his problems as well, though, so kind of a little bit even in that regard. It is a little bit of what could have been with both of these drivers. They both did really, really well. Logan was standouts, one of the standouts this year. Qualifying pace was excellent. So it'll be interesting to see how he goes next year in Formula One. But I don't know. bit of a topsy-turvy season for both of them, I guess, but they both proved their worth, which I think, was, good enough for them.
Good enough for Williams, it seems, with Logan Sargeant, and arguably good enough for Liam Lawson and Red Bull, with no seat really for him in the end. Tyler, Carlin, 2022.
I think Carlin have been slowly progressing in terms of the last couple of years since they won the title in 2018, the team's title, that is, with Lando Norris and Sergio Sette. They've been good, but they haven't quite been as good as they could have done. I think they've missed their potential. The likes last year, they had Daruvala and Tictum, a pairing that on paper could produce a championship in terms of progressing together with points. I think this year, Lawson has had a similar season to Pourchaire, but slightly, I'd say, not as strong as Pourchaire's. And I think qualifying has even been a bigger curse for him. He came in again as a title contender. I think he needed to win this year, really, to sort of guarantee himself that F1 spot. Yes, he's got that reserve role, but he's playing, even though he is currently the top dog of those Red Bull guys at the moment, he's playing a very dangerous game because of the fact that he's not in Europe. And yes, I know, obviously, he's on the Honda side of things, and that will help him. But there's going to be a lot of Red Bull drivers coming in now. You've got Iwasa coming into the game.
Yeah.
You've got Hajar, as you mentioned, who could be the new boy for them. There's so many drivers that could easily just knock Lawson off the perch, and he'll slip down and become, a completely different series-related driver. And he's another person who, like Armstrong, like Vips, would have been in Formula One in another, universe. So I think Sargeant has actually done everything to deserve, because the way he had to go from an F3 title battle where he lost by 1 or 2 points, then had to race with Charouz for a year in F3, which, name a driver that has raced for them that has, gone on to do really, really well the next year, other than sort of like Enzo Fittipaldi. It's not a long list. And then he comes straight into F2 as a rookie. Yes, with Carlin. Yes, with Williams backing. But he's made all of his opportunities count. And as we talked about on the podcast the other week, the pressure that he was under in Abu Dhabi, even with it pretty much being guaranteed, he was stressing a lot. So I think in a way he sort of deserved to get his moment. And it'll be interesting to see whether he's better than Latifi compared to someone like Albon. So that'd be interesting. I think.
Well, that's a very hard contest to be better than Latifi.
But in terms of racing, I'd say for Lawson, I'd say probably a B. I think he's pretty much exactly as I expected from him this year. He didn't go above, he didn't go below. Maybe a B plus at a push, but definitely not in the A category.
Josh, going to defend New Zealand?
Yeah, A plus. No, B plus I think is fair enough. The thing that let him down mainly was qualifying, in my opinion. But even with that, hard pressed again to put him as the driver of the year. But going to Super Formula next year, I think he will be in his element. So it'll be interesting to see. But then again, last time Red Bull sent a driver to Super Formula to drive a Team Mugen car, that worked out extremely well.
Let's go, because we've got just time. We're so late. Scoring, Logan Sargeant, the only driver going to Formula One next year. Does he get an A? Have we got an A-rated driver going to Formula One, Tyler?
Yeah, I'd say an A. I think he's given Carlin their best performance in a while, and they actually pipped ART in the final round just to rub it in. So I think for that, I'd say, yeah, I'll give Sargeant an A. Definitely not an A plus. But yeah, his expectations were probably not the highest of all the rookies coming in this season, and he's outperformed the likes of Hauger and that. So yeah, certainly.
Top rookie of the year, Josh Revell. Is he an A? Is he an A minus?
I'd say A minus. There are times where he just struggled with the pressure, especially in that last round. If he struggles to cope with the pressure in that regard, Formula One will be a bit of a step up. So yeah, something to work on. But yeah, fantastic season all the same though.
A minus, Tyler. Are we happy with an A minus? That's pretty fair in the end. Overall, A minus. Well, we come to the team at last. One of these drivers, I think, is the only one we're going to give an A's, A pluses to. The other one, I've no idea what you guys are going to say. MP Motorsport, 305 points, teams, champions, absolute step up of the game from where they've been. Shows what happens when you have a team and a driver working in harmony. These guys surprised everybody, I think. Nobody put Drugovich as a potential champion. No one would have put MP Motorsport as a team's champion at the start of the year. So let's start with Clement Novalak. Josh Revell, your thoughts on Clement Novalak's championship this year?
What the hell happened to him? Like, that's all I got to say. That's like people who know that he's a halfway decent driver. He can drive.
Really
a lot
can.
of us know that. But yikes, the gulf between those two this year is bewildering, really. You got to hope that he can do better next year, but he was just nowhere near his teammate for whatever reason. And it was just puzzling. It was all hell to see. And it was difficult to see exactly how he was doing in reality because it was way down the pack while his teammate was going so far up ahead. So it's hard to adjudicate how he did this year, really, because, like, again, he was just in no man's land.
Tyler, I feel frustrated with Novalak because obviously the team and the car were good, and he is good. Finished P3 in Formula 3. Didn't work out this year. Any reasons why?
I have an interesting insight into Clement. So, as you mentioned, P3 last year with Trident in F3. Coming in as a rookie, he was called Mr. Consistent in his time in F3 because of the fact that he didn't win races. He just got P2s, P3s consistently, similar to how, in a way, Derivala or Fittipaldi have this year, really. And they've got more podiums, which has kept them in the fight. And I think that always gives you a bit of an element of question over pace. If you can't seem to get that P1, I always feel like there seems to be a question over whether you can get it done. If you step up, you've got that sort of killer instinct to just go for it. And I think that for whatever reason, I don't think he knows even now, but for some reason this year, it just wasn't happening. And the more and more I spoke to him, the less and less he wanted to speak about it because it was the same issue over and over again. And I think the fact that his teammate was the champion and one of the most dominant champions in F2 history is, as we've mentioned with the likes of Doohan having Sato as your teammate, it's the opposite. Having a teammate that is constantly in the headlines and dominating while you're at the back and people are just looking at you going, you finished third in F3 last year. Why are you fighting with guys like Sato and Cordeal? It was very bad, but he still scored more points than someone like Cordeal by a pretty decent margin. He scored nearly double the points that Cordeal scored. So it shows that he's still not that far off. You know, he just needs to, I think, take a bit of pressure off his shoulders and just go for it. Next year supposed to be moving on, possibly to Trident again. He is moving to Trident. My bad. Of course he is. Was confirmed, and that could help. We see Drugovich obviously move back to MP. That worked out. Sometimes reunions work out for whatever reason. He can just find that pace again. It'll be really good to see him up there because I think everybody's looked at him this year and gone, I'm really just confused by it.
I know where we're going to go with the Drugovich score, but I'm more interested now just to focus on Clement. So, Josh, I don't even know where to place this guy.
C minus, I guess.
You got not in agreement there, Tyler. That fair?
I'm harsh when it comes to people like Clement because yes, he's struggled compared to his teammate, but he's a champion. But look at these other rookies that have all exceeded, and he's been way below the expectations. However, we did give the likes of Cordeal and Caldwell a C minus, so I'm going to give him a C minus as well because I think that's only fair.
A+ drivers, I have to say, in my opinion, I'm not going to force it on you guys, but like you said, Tyler, we've not seen a season of domination Formula 2 that often that we've seen in Drugovich this year. 265 points, 101 points ahead of the nearest rival. No retirements. Maybe that's a reason why. Bunch of wins. Spain, double win. What a year for Felipe Drugovich.
It was all right. Nah, like he did everything he needed to do. Like, what else can you say other than just he just did everything he needed to do, really? What more could you ask of a driver? Just quick as all hell. Just everything came right from the season as it was supposed to do. That round in Spain where he just blitzed the field, won both races. Almost summed up the season for him. Just absolutely on the pace and took a well-deserved title. Like, I know I'm starting to sound like the bitter person, like my driver didn't win, all that kind of stuff. Nah, it's just more like there's not much more to say, you know? It's kind of a bit bulletproof this year.
When it comes to the season Drugovich has had, it makes you think, why weren't there more eyes on him at the beginning? Was there something that we were missing, or was this a genuine surprise? And I think that actually, the Formula 2 sometimes ruins us when we look at guys like Vips and you look at guys like Armstrong and you think, no, it's going to come good at some point. You know, they'll be at the top. They'll fight back. You look at someone like Nick de Vries, who made it count eventually, you know, a few seasons in, and then he finally got it. None of the guys really that were in their third or fourth year managed to do it apart from him. And it's really weird because obviously he was the one that wasn't connected to an F1 team. People criticized him throughout the year, constantly asking him questions. Does that put you at a disadvantage? Does that mean that you're at threat of losing out if you win the championship because you're not linked, you haven't got that access, you haven't got that route? I think it's benefited him. It's massively taken the pressure off him. He has said the whole time that the reason why he wasn't a part of an F1 team or academy was because of that pressure aspect, and that he wanted to have complete control over his future. Now, that is the big issue. A+, and I think me and Josh can say right now, Josh, can we say A+, easy, Drugovich?
Yep.
So no regard there. You know, we talked about it, you can fire off the statistics all you want about how, he's won the championship by 101 points, the amount of pole positions he got, the double race win in Spain, the win in Monaco as well, to add to that, of all places you want to win at. He got a home win for his MP Motorsport team in Zandvoort. Literally everything. Consistently amazing. But is he going to be another driver that has left himself short of the door because of a lack of negotiation skills or whatever it might be? He has left his future below where it should be in regards to how he's being rated for this year. And yet he's going to be a reserve driver and the first member of the Aston Martin development program. That should sound good, but it sounds so weak.
The only thing I think might be in his favour is we've seen what Fernando Alonso can be like. And if he walks in the middle of next year, if the car is as shit as it might be, he could have a route to F1 very unconventionally that way. I don't know. That's the only thing I can really hope for with Felipe. So A+ driver, probably an F in terms of what happens to him from here on out for next season. But like we saw with de Vries, who knows what could happen. I think that's fair to wrap up, and easily the longest podcast. Well done, guys, for speaking up. And what time is it now, Tyler, for you? Is it 5 o'clock? My calculation's correct. 5 a.m. that is, for anybody who's listening, not watching. So, yeah. Well done, mate. Well done. So A+ for you as well, Tyler. Well done, mate. That's all the time we have for this week. Thank you, everybody, for watching and listening. If you listened to the whole thing, A+ for you as well. Next week, a bit more conventional. We're going to have our season finale. If you'd like to have your question asked on that episode, use the hashtag AskF1FS on Twitter. Drop questions below. If you're watching on YouTube, respond to our Instagram stories or posts, or let us know what questions you have on your mind on Discord. Look to the podcast questions channel. If you're watching on YouTube, dropping a like on the video, leaving a comment, and subscribing all really helps us out. And if you're listening, leaving a review on the podcast platform you're listening on, greatly appreciated. Finally, check out f1feederseries.com for more Feeder Series insight and follow F1 Feeder Series 1, F1 FS Americas, and F1 FS Live on Twitter. You can find the links to all of that, plus the Twitter accounts of myself, Josh, and Tyler in the podcast show notes or the YouTube description. You already know where to find Josh Revell. Day of this podcast going out, there's a new video from you as well, Josh. What was that about? The Senna one?
And Senna's junior career, yeah.
So even more Feeder Series content for you when you're already subscribed to Josh Revell. Thank you so much, Josh, for coming back on. Thank you, Tyler, for staying up so late. And thank you, everybody watching and listening, for listening for so bloody long. Until next time, we have been the F1 Feeder Series podcast. Goodbye.